rhythmic teens with massive machines, everybody living beyond their means, brotherly love from the messed up genes, nobody wants to intervene. The billboard screams you're advertising. Beautiful creatures left to live.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Anthony James, Dean of the American College of Natural Medicine, Director and Chief Instructor of the Thai Yoga Center, the oldest continuously operating Ayurveda and Yoga Therapy Pro certification program featuring traditional Thai medicine in the U.S., also known as traditional Thai medical massage, and the Medical Clinical Director of the Natural Wellness Solutions Tribal Wellness Center, also here in Florida. I also belong to many other associations. Today I'm bringing you some really important news I think that everybody should hear coming out of the European Parliament that is relating to the pandemic, to the COVID debacle, which I and other real, genuine physicians and scientists have been challenging and questioning virtually nonstop since 2019. Originally, we were shut down progressively harder as the lockdowns, mask mandates, and as the vaccines began to roll out, and we continued to question the narrative. We were deplatformed from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, private commercial accounts on Vimeo that were encrypted accounts were actually completely destroyed, and I'll get back to that more later. But especially groups like America's Frontline Doctors were persecuted, prosecuted. Groups like the Association for Physicians and Surgeons was challenged because we challenged the perfectly safe and effective narrative, which from day one we knew wasn't true. We questioned the statistics that were being shown. We questioned every aspect from gold standard to PCR test validation, along with its inventor, for example, Dr. Carey Mullis. And we were told to shut up. We were told to go away. We were told we're killing people's grandmothers by even asking questions. I even published a book in 2023 on recovering from SARS-CoV-2 and long COVID, which was also shadow banned. And much of the information that I put in that book and the questions I asked and the documentation that I had showed that the common narrative was completely false. It was false narrative. It was hyperbolic. It was misleading. And the consequence, which was to sell vaccines via PCR tests, was deadly. Now we know that almost every critical thing that we said or questioned in 2019, 2020, 21, 2, 3, 4, up to 5 minutes ago has been in fact validated. We now know through whistleblowers. We now know through FOIAs for emails from the fraudsters. I won't mention their particular names right now, but we now know that in fact we were right, they were wrong, and they knew we were right, and they knew they were wrong, and they pushed these EU emergency use authorizations, mandates, and so on. And in fact, they still are in many cases, not just here in the US, but around the world. So without further ado, let's get into this presentation at the European Parliament, where they are looking at what we would call whistleblower type activity regarding the issues that I've just
I think
discussed.
It is a very important evening tonight because here it is. This is what I call the smoking gun. In this documentation, it becomes quite clear and Naomi will then, of course, elaborate on that. Pfizer lied, and so did our governments. And how did it all start? It started pretty much out by something called the Freedom of Information Act, and requiring Pfizer, respectively the FDA, the Federal Drug Association, or
Food and Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration of the United States, to release these Pfizer papers, and Pfizer, respectively FDA, then not wanting to do that, petitioned a court, and they wanted the judge to allow the FDA to keep the papers under wraps for 75 years. Interestingly enough, though, there have been talk in Germany this April, the so-called Freedom of Information Act, so any citizen can ask the government for information, and there was a discussion about abolishing that right for the citizens altogether. Now that's a big tell. So they no longer want the citizens to even know what the government should be publishing. But that is just a side note. So anyhow, the FDA wanted the Pfizer papers to be locked up for 75 years, which the judge didn't go with. Then the FDA offered, well, then, we would be prepared to publish 500 pages per month, which in essence would have taken 75 years to get all of the paper out, because it was in total roughly 450,000 pages. Well, the judge didn't want to have any of that, and he ordered the FDA, they would have to release 55,000 pages per month. And there was over a period of, I think, like 1 year or 1.5 years. And then it was all there. And then our very honorable guest tonight, Dr. Naomi Wolf, your concern was that it would just be lost in history, as you said earlier, because there is no way that layman can sift through 450,000 pages of highly technical information. So what Naomi managed to do was to gather, how many? 2,000, 3,000?
3,500.
3,500 volunteers globally sifting through that information and putting all of the information together for everyone to see and everyone to read. Like I said, it is the smoking gun. We have the information. And I just remember today, and I actually looked it up, it was on July 25th of 2022. I made a public comment in an event like this, and I will read to you what I said 3 years ago. This mRNA campaign will go down in history as the biggest medical scandal ever. And moreover, it will go down as the biggest crime committed against humanity. Back then, anyone could have known if he wanted to know. All you had to do was go through the adverse event reports in the United States, and you would have found out that within the first 7 months of the rollout of the mRNA injection, there were 20 times more serious adverse effects, and there were 23 times more deaths reported than of all of the other vaccines combined ever since they have been rolled out in the 70s. I repeat, 7 months of mRNA injections, 20 times more serious side effects, and 23 times more deaths reported than all of the other vaccines combined in a period of 30 years. This is the lie that people have been literally pushed down their throats. They have been threatened. They have been ostracized. They have been criminalized. I mean, you name it. that went on. So it was particularly interesting that I made this comment 3 years ago, and I read it in your book. In the very first pages, Naomi, you said the very same thing. And yeah, I stand by that comment, and I will be repeating it for times to come. So anyway, but you didn't come here to listen to my boring remarks here. I'm pretty much sure you came all to see and hear and listen to Dr. Naomi Campbell.
Thank you.
Can you imagine? Great, isn't it great? Dr. Naomi Wolf, of course. And I really have to thank you. You put in a lot of work. I mean, just flipping through the pages, it is so much information. But to compile it and put it together for laymen to understand and read, to really understand the massive lie that we have been subjected to. And I would very much like you to join me in welcoming the great Naomi Wolf. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Can you hear me loud and clear if I sit this distance? Wonderful. Well, thank you, MEP Anderson. Thank you to your so hospitable staff who has welcomed me and my husband, Brian O'Shea, to Brussels. And thank you all for taking time from your incredibly important work to sit with us here. Thank you to those watching online. I just want to say before I begin that it's extremely moving to me to be sitting in this place, in the heart of Europe, and meeting so many people from different political perspectives, really different in many ways. I consider myself a liberal. I've been a Democrat. I advised the Clinton team and Vice President Gore in his election campaign, but that really doesn't matter. You know, Ms. Anderson, MEP Anderson, or with other MEPs whom I've met here, their colleagues from whatever political party, because what's happening right now in Europe and the United States and worldwide is an extraordinary historical moment. It's related to what I'm going to tell you, but all over the world, people are realizing that what divides us in policy terms or political labels is not nearly as important as our fundamental core values as Europeans, as North Americans, people around the world who love freedom and individual human rights, the rule of law. And that's what was targeted ultimately by these injections as it's being targeted in other ways. And I will explain that. But fundamentally, whatever the political party is of people I'm meeting here, we are brothers and sisters. We are allies because first of all, we need to save European democracy. We're saving American democracy. We need to save democracies, rule of law, and free speech around the world. So I just want to say that before we begin. Shall I launch right in? All right. So some of you may know who I am. I've been a public figure since I was 26 years old. And others may not. I'm a long-standing best-selling feminist author. I've written 9 best-selling books, translated in European languages of many kinds. And I was a Rhodes Scholar. I got a DPhil at Oxford University in English literature. I'm not a medical doctor, but I am a journalist. I've appeared in every major news site. I was a columnist for The Guardian and for the Sunday Times of London and so on. But all of that didn't matter in June of 2021 when which covered women's reproductive health. When I noted that we're reporting eyewitness accounts of their bodies, which is, as a feminist, you're supposed to be allowed to listen to women about their bodies. They were reporting eyewitness accounts of menstrual damage upon having received the mRNA injection. And literally, that was my post. And overnight, I was canceled from X, Twitter at that time, canceled from Facebook, YouTube. My bio changed around the world simultaneously, which is interesting. I didn't think AI had rolled out then, but something did that. Went from, Rhodes Scholar, doctorate at Oxford, to conspiracy theorist. And overnight, every major news outlet that had published me and featured me for 40 years closed their doors to me, and I was literally voiceless. So that doesn't really matter what happened to me personally, except that a warning signal that women around the world were entitled to have received about their own bodies and reproductive health was intentionally silenced. And I found out later, during lawsuits brought by the state's attorneys general of the state of Missouri and of Louisiana, that it was people for whom I had voted, the Biden administration, notably senior people at the CDC, the Census Bureau, which knows where I live, I'm related to, other agencies, including law enforcement agencies, that had colluded to put pressure on Twitter and Facebook and other social media sites to silence my tweet and to discredit me. And that was very terrifying, to find out the most powerful government in the world had singled you out. And by the way, we have a First Amendment in the United States, thank God. And two courts now have found that two settlements have found that my constitutional First Amendment rights were violated, and that the Biden administration had no legal right to silence a citizen, but that happened. So as a journalist, I realized that there must be a story here, because why go to so much trouble to suppress this simple tweet of mine? And in 2022, as you described, the successful lawsuit by attorney Aaron Siri led to the forced release of 450,000 documents from Pfizer in the custody of our FDA. Now, I was only being hosted at that time by Steve Bannon, the far right-wing commentator. Another example of, I don't agree with Bannon on a lot of issues. I'm still a liberal, but he cared about what was happening to women and children. So I was talking on his show about these issues, and he said, these documents will be lost to history. Of course, you're going to convene a group of experts to go through them. And I said on the air, of course I am, not having any experience in doing that. But miraculously, 3,500 doctors and scientists did convene and worked for 2.5 years pro bono in service of humanity, but also out of love for science and medicine, to read through these massive documents, technical documents, and to issue what are now 105 reports. 50 of them are in that book, if you would kindly hold it up at some point. And we published them in real time. Now, before I tell you what's in the Pfizer documents, I just want to note that it's been 2.5 years since we began publishing these reports, and we have not received a lawyer's letter from Pfizer. So what is reported is accurate. No one from Pfizer is telling us to cease and desist. It's accurate. And also, it's not my opinion. I just want to stress that. I'm not the author of this book. I'm an editor of it. Amy Kelly is the leader of the effort, my COO. But what's in this book are reports that link directly to the primary documents. So if you have any doubt about any conclusion in any of these reports, you can link, you can check the Pfizer documents and see for yourself what that primary document looks like. All right, so what's in the Pfizer documents? First of all, and I think this is very important for you as MEPs, Pfizer knew a month into the rollout into the public of this injection, so November of 2020, that this vaccine did not work to stop COVID. And I want you to process that and absorb that. It means that everything that followed, the mandates, the lost jobs, the businesses that had to close, the children not allowed to go back to school or university if they didn't take the shot, right? The armed forces compelled to take the shot, the pilots compelled. All of that followed, the two-tier society, the suppression of liberties, was predicated on a lie. It didn't stop COVID, concluded Pfizer. The efficacy and vaccine failure. And the most common side effect of getting vaccinated is COVID. So everything that followed was a lie. Second, they knew that the injection did not stay in your deltoid. I'm sure that Europeans, probably through the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, like our FDA, or other public health entities, told people here, if you have side effects, it's likely to be chills, fever, a little fatigue. You may need to lie down. No, Pfizer knew that and they said that the materials stay in the injection site. They knew that was a lie. In fact, in the Pfizer documents, there are charts showing that the materials, the spike protein, the mRNA, the lipid nanoparticles, which is a petroleum byproduct, rather polyethylene glycol, a petroleum byproduct surrounding lipid nanoparticles and industrial fat, they didn't stay in the deltoid. They biodistribute within 48 hours, and they leave the injection site and biodistribute to major organs throughout the body. They cross the blood-brain barrier. You may have noticed personality changes in some of your loved ones who took this injection, but they also accumulate in the liver, the adrenals, the spleen, the lymphatic system, and if you're a woman, they accumulate in your ovaries. And so this is an industrial fat accumulating in women's ovaries, right? So the first injection accumulates in your ovaries. The second injection, more accumulates in your ovaries. Our experts could not find any mechanism whereby this material left the body, male or female. So by the first booster, people are already reporting when they do surgery on vaccinated women that they're fully blocked ovaries, okay, as well as other kinds of damage. Pfizer knew that. Pfizer knew that they had to hire 2,400 full-time staff in order to process the reports of serious adverse events they were already starting to receive. And indeed, within the Pfizer documents, it's a 3-year period of time, end of November of 2020 to February of 2021. Well, that tallied up over 42,000 serious adverse events. Many individuals had multiple serious adverse events, and just an overwhelming number of side effects that were not fever and chills, but in fact, things you were not told about. So the number one side effect in the Pfizer documents is something called myalgia, which is muscle pain. How many people do you know who just feel bad? Well, Pfizer knew they would feel bad. Doctors are baffled, myalgia. The second most common side effect is joint pain, because these injections are inflammatory. And Pfizer knew that. What is arthritis? What is joint pain? Tendon pain, it's inflammatory. How many people do you know who are limping or had to have knee replacements, hip replacements, shoulder replacements? Young, healthy people, many of them. Pfizer knew. The third most common side effect, as I mentioned, is COVID. But after that, there is a catastrophic industrial scale tallying of horrifically serious side effects, notably heart damage, myocarditis, pericarditis, problems with the aortas, a great deal of blood damage, thrombotic thrombocytopenia, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots. These lipid nanoparticles create clotting in the body. Everyone knew that about lipid nanoparticles before this mRNA who worked with them. Florid neurological events. Our experts found that the lipid nanoparticles strip the myelin sheath from nerves, which is how electricity is conducted in a nerve impulse. So, of course, you're getting tremors. How many people do you know who now have tremors? You're getting Guillain-Barré. You're getting dementias, epilepsy-type seizures, horrific neurological events. And also autoimmune disorders of all kinds, lupus-type disorders, because Now we know these injections damage the immune system. Also, things that would surprise you, a huge amount of eye damage, blindness, eye damage of all kinds. And in addition to all of these side effects, miscarriages, I'll get into the reproductive damage, 1,200 deaths in 3 months. And these are not statistically random people who happen to have died. They were old, they had prior conditions. 1,200 deaths that doctors let Pfizer or the authorities know needed to be recorded because there was some causality they were concerned about. Other smoking guns, you call this the smoking gun. 2 of our reports show, in my view, causality. Half of the liver and the stroke serious adverse events took place 48 hours after the injection, including deaths. Pfizer knew this. Okay. Pfizer knew by April of 2021 that minors were being injured by this vaccine, specifically myocarditis and pericarditis, heart damage. Never before have we had healthy young people dropping dead on planes. But what Pfizer knew was that 35 minors had sustained heart damage. Indeed, one of the most scandalous things that our work has surfaced is that the FDA knew, the CDC knew, Dr. Walensky knew by April of 2021. The Israeli Ministry of Health was trying to tell the CDC and the Biden administration that minors were having their hearts damaged. And instead of, we did a Freedom of Information Act request for the Biden records at that time, mentioning myocarditis. And we found that there was active conversation, including to POTUS, right, surfacing all the way up potentially to the White House, 15 White House staffers, Dr. Walensky, Dr. Fauci, the head of HHS, all on these communications where they were
One moment. Okay, so let me just run through a couple of things real quick. She's going so fast. It's such a beautiful, horrific deep dive. For some people, this is going to be a truth bomb. But number one, the whole narrative aside, we're not really talking again whether COVID virus is a real thing or not, whether there's a gold standard. We're just talking about, let's say, give them the devil's advocate that COVID is a real thing and the mRNA delivery systems are what is the fix? What is the cure? Number one, that it would prevent infection. It was a bull-faced lie. They knew it wouldn't, and they proved in their own studies in the first 20 days or so that it had no impact. In fact, we find out later that people who were diagnosed with COVID at much higher rates were in the vaccinated population. Okay, number two, adverse events. That the MAD would stay local. That the mRNA would stay local to the site of injection. That was a lie. They knew it from the beginning, and very, very quickly they found out that, in fact, there were constituents of the, I hate to call it a vaccine, but that's what is the common understanding. But there were adjuvants, constituents of the vaccine that in fact could go through the brain-blood barrier, and within a few hours, certainly, excuse me, certainly within a few days, would travel throughout the body, throughout all the organ systems, depositing in some more than others, but would in fact show up in the brain in a quite short period of time. And then you would begin to see aberrations and changes in the organs, in the circulatory system, and the neurologic system, including the brain, and the kinds of changes that we were seeing and still see and are seeing and escalating to see right now were changes in personality, rise in all kinds of disorder, if you want to call them spectrum disorders, from things that might have been considered 5 years ago on the autism spectrum. It's one reason I believe right now that we have a growing politic of children who are especially vulnerable to this between the ages of 15 and 20, who don't appear to be able to focus very well. They're very reactive, very prone to anger, and not prone to be reasonable. They're forgetful. They don't consider past events in their reasoning or in their rationale, and they have learning difficulties, and that many of them actually are not literate. They're not able to actually read and write. And this is not an imaginary thing. It's actually something that is being observed in real time. Side effects of myalgia and joint pain. And like she said, it used to be that myalgias and joint pain, serious joint pain, especially in young people, especially in athletic people, was a rare thing. Used to be. Normally you'd only see it in some rare disease or poisoning, toxicity, or an accident or trauma or sports injury or an RSS syndrome, repetitive stress from overuse, like carpal tunnel or rotator cuff. And yet, it seems like every person we talk to has joint pain and has fatigue associated with myalgias, paresthesias, joint pain, and overall indications of inflammation that did not exist as a body politic common to the population before 4 and 5 years ago. We look at the neurologic damage in VAERS, which has been released under FOIA that she mentioned. We now know that some of the reporting side effects or adverse events within 48 hours of injection range from tremors to epileptic seizures to full-on quadriplegia, full-on paraplegias, quadriplegias, and extraordinarily severe sudden onset of paralysis, and on the milder side, maybe MS type conditions, sudden onset with no previous history, eye damage, and then of course deaths, 1,200 deaths in the first 3 months that they recorded, not us. They pretended until yesterday that the vaccines were perfectly safe and effective. So when you take these four lists of things, and I haven't mentioned the heart damage, cardiovascular, cardiopulmonary issues with myocarditis, cardiomyopathy, clotting, blood clotting disorders, etc. They were claiming that it was perfectly safe and effective. But if you were one of these people affected, substantially damaged or crippled, and or died, and you're the family member of one of these young people, old people, infants, whatever, in other words, across the spectrum, who died suddenly for no particular medical reason, immediately or quite soon after being vaccinated and booster, being reiterated that it's perfectly safe and effective, you have nothing to worry about, is not so much comforting. I'm just putting it out there. And in my clinic, in the last year, I have not seen a single client who did not have some of these symptoms, if not most of these symptoms. Not a single one. I haven't had a single person who was vaccinated who hasn't tested, quote unquote, positive for COVID. Haven't had a single person who was not having issues, cognitive issues, whether it's issues with focus, memory, long and short-term memory, and emotional states, being more emotional, being more prone to fear, and being more prone to rage, and being more prone to despair and depression. Not a single person. Myalgia and joint pain, we're treating. I don't care what you come in for. You come in with a headache, we're treating you for myalgia after we talk to you for joint pain after we talk to you for 10 minutes. And proactively for heart disease. All right.
Their children and young adults from this risk, they were deciding how to spin a cover-up. And they issued a 17-page document that even after the FOIA is completely redacted, which was a script that they used to spend the next 3 months of summer telling parents to get their minors injected. And indeed, a big influencer TikTok campaign encouraging young adults and minors to get injected. And they knew that kids would sustain what is often deadly heart damage from these injections. They knew. And in fact, Senator Ron Johnson, now under this administration, is using our work to unredact those documents and to shine a light on that cover-up. He had hearings about it. Pfizer knew all of these things, but all these side effects, all this damage isn't the most shocking, surprising thing in the Pfizer documents. And I'll tell you what is. You know, COVID is a respiratory infection. So you would expect a lot of information in Pfizer documents about lungs, about oxygen levels, about mucous membranes. No, there's almost nothing about respiratory issues in the Pfizer documents. What there is a 360-degree obsessive focus on ruining human reproduction. Sperm, ruining fallopian tubes, ruining ova, ruining placentas, ruining fetuses in utero, ruining the birth process, ruining lactation. That's what they were studying. That's what they were focused on. Why is that? Why did they take male and female rats, male vaccinated, female unvaccinated, mate them, sacrifice the rats, and examine the cells of their sex organs for a respiratory infection? Why is that? Overwhelmingly, the focus is on ruining human reproduction. So let me just give you some examples. They knew, as I mentioned, that it blocks the ovaries, which could contribute to the menstrual damage that I mentioned. But they also knew, as I mentioned, that the lipid nanoparticles, which are designed to cross every membrane in the body. What is a membrane? The placenta is a membrane. The lipid nanoparticles traverse the placenta of women who were told in my country to get this injection during their pregnancies, violating decades of knowledge about how to not hurt babies in utero, right? You don't give the pregnant woman anything. But women were told to inject this, traverses the placenta. It causes calcifications in the placenta, which prevent the baby from getting nutrients and oxygen. And in fact, in my country, midwives independently are reporting to me, leaking to me. As a journalist, when you have multiple independent reports, there's a story there that babies are being born early because the placentas cannot grow normally. And people are nodding. They're seeing the same thing, no doubt, in Europe, or there are reports of it. The placentas are flat. They send me pictures, not normal, supplied with blood and oxygen. And so babies have to be delivered early. So standard. Well, it's not that easy to deliver a baby from a mother whose placenta has been impaired. Placentas are falling apart in the delivery process. What does that mean? It means women are hemorrhaging during childbirth or retaining part of the placenta, which is so dangerous. And so maternal fetal mortality, women dying in childbirth in the West, which had largely solved this deadly problem of the past in other parts of the world, is up by 40% since the injections. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles would go into the baby. And again, what's a membrane? They knew that the lipid nanoparticles would traverse the membrane around the testes of baby boys in utero, thus degrading the Leydig cells and Sertoli cells of baby boys of vaccinated moms. Even if the babies are not vaccinated, they're getting this from their moms. So what does that do? Sertoli cells and Leydig cells are the factories of masculinity. Hormones, they switch on the hormones of masculinity at adolescence, triggering what we think of as a traditional adult male development, deep voices, broad shoulders, body hair, facial hair, and as an adult, the ability to father a child successfully. Well, we don't even know if these baby boys in utero at adolescence will grow into normal, fertile adult males, even if they're never vaccinated with this mRNA injection. But Pfizer knew they were damaging the testes of baby boys in utero. They knew they were damaging sperm. An andrology report confirmed that the injection killed and motility of sperm in men. And to this day, and this is a job for you all, I believe, to this day, there's something Pfizer knows about dangers to women in vaccinated men's sperm that they're not disclosing. In the Pfizer documents, there's a warning to men who are subjects of the study not to have intercourse if they were vaccinated with unvaccinated women of childbearing age, and if they did, to use 2 reliable forms of contraception. 2, Pfizer defines exposure to the vaccine as including, right, shedding is supposed to be a conspiracy theory, as including skin contact, breath, and body fluids, such as semen. And to this day, we don't know what that is, right? We know that women, anecdotally, are having horrible cramps, real problems with when they have intercourse with vaccinated husbands. We don't know why Pfizer said don't do that. I can tell you one hypothetical a little further on. They told women in the study not to get pregnant. Nonetheless, 270 women got pregnant in the study, vaccinated women. Now, 234 of them, the records of what happened to that pregnancy were lost, which is illegal. Pfizer is supposed to follow them through pregnancy. However, of the 36 women who gave birth, over 80% of them lost their babies. Over 80%. Pfizer knew that. One of the most chilling things in the Pfizer papers is something called a pregnancy and lactation report. And I'm feeling like the heaviness in the room, and I empathize. You know, this is very dark news, but I also want to say there's a lot that can be done, and you all are in a beautiful position to do it. So please bear with me for the rest of this darkness, because, you know, this is very serious, but there are ways to engage with this information after you have it constructively. The pregnancy and lactation report is an 8-page document that was prepared specifically for the White House and given to Dr. Walensky, to the FDA, to the White House in April of 2021. Now, I am the daughter I'm the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants, but I'm the granddaughter of 2 people who lost 8 siblings in the Holocaust. And that's why I'm sitting here with you today, because if that wasn't part of our family's history, I wouldn't understand so clearly the importance of raising these warnings and calling attention to these atrocities. I've written about, and I know it's illegal in Germany, too bad. I'm going to use my American free speech. I'm in a free place. I've studied deeply the history of Nazi medicine. As a result, when I saw the pregnancy and lactation report as a Jew and as the granddaughter of people, part of whose family were wiped out by them, this was a very chilling and recognizable document. It had charts, very, very scientific, neutral, careful chart. Even superficial students of history, you know why I stress that. These careful charts show horrific damage to women and babies in the pregnancy and lactation report. There is a chart showing menstrual damage to tens of thousands of women, 15,000 women bleeding every day after being injected, 10,000 women having 2 periods a month, 7,500 women having no periods at all, meaning they're totally infertile, 10-year-old girls bleeding upon being injected, 85-year-old women bleeding upon being injected, women hemorrhaging, women passing clots, lives ruined, and certainly fertility ruined. All of it documented meticulously by Pfizer in the pregnancy and lactation report, which went to the White House and to Dr. Rochelle Walensky and the FDA. I'm quite sure if you investigate, you will find comparable charts that went to your leaders across Europe because they were all on the same page. But I'm getting ahead of my story. Also in the pregnancy and lactation report is a chart showing that they experimented on babies and they knew it, and they experimented on at least 3 babies to death. Okay? This showed that babies who were nursing from vaccinated moms, these ones had vomiting, and these ones had edema, which is swollen tissues, and these ones had fever, and these ones had failure to thrive. They couldn't gain weight. These ones were inconsolable. I can never get that out of my head. One poor baby went into convulsions after nursing from a vaccinated mom, and then was rushed to the ER and died after multi-organ system failure. Her whole system shut down. What did they know? What is breast milk made of? I learned this in this process. It's made of out of the building blocks of lymph and blood. And so the lipid nanoparticles, the polyethylene glycol that are in the blood and lymph of vaccinated moms are turning into poisoned milk that is poisoning their babies. And Pfizer knew it. And to this day, the women of Europe don't know it. The women of America, for the most part, don't know it unless they happen to have heard me or come up on this book. And so they're so at risk. And nursing, which is such an important part of human development and bonding and the immune system, has gone from 34% of all babies and moms to 14% of all babies and moms. And babies' first experience, I think we're going to see the damage of this in a generation, of human intimacy is poisoned nourishment now. And they don't have the words to say it to their moms or dads. But Pfizer knew. So this went to the White House, and 3 days later, on April 23rd, 2021, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, a mother, I should note, gave a White House press conference to the people of my nation, saying, with this in hand, there's no bad time to get your COVID mRNA injection before you get pregnant, during your pregnancy, or after your baby is born. She said that, knowing this. Lastly, in the pregnancy and lactation report, 2 babies died in utero, and Pfizer concluded that they died due to, quote, maternal exposure to the vaccine. So Pfizer knew that they were going to kill babies, that they were killing babies, and put them at risk. And fast forward, because I need to reach some of the conclusions of my talk. This is very predictable, what would happen. We're now 4 years after the rollout of this injection. And this book will show you this 360-degree attack on every aspect of human reproduction. Well, Igor Chudov, a mathematician and commentator, has analyzed government databases from about 20 different nations, including European nations. And vaccinated nations have lost 13 to 20% of their live births have dropped by that amount. And he calculates that in Europe, there are 1 million missing babies. We analyzed the government data from Canada. another terrible drop in live births. And now there was a big study from the Czech Republic, I believe, that also showed a dramatic drop in live births. And other studies are confirming what we began to publish in 2022, that vaccinated women are losing their eggs. They don't have the fertility of unvaccinated women. So this happened. This happened. And in spite of every effort, people who tried comprehensive suppression of this could have saved so many lives. I was just in Iceland. They are not at replacement levels for their own population. They now have 1.5 live births for every couple of 2 Icelanders. Icelanders will be extinct over time, God forbid, unless this can be reversed, unless we can study and treat the infertility that Pfizer and their allies brought about. So to conclude, because I know we need to take questions, why I have concluded very reluctantly that we can't attribute these horrors to, corporate greed, people moving too fast. If someone tries to tell you that, they're lying, right? If it was corporate greed, then month 1 or month 2 of seeing these deaths and side effects, Pfizer would have pulled, and your authorities would have pulled, Britain's authorities would have pulled, Canada's, Australia's, this technology. But they didn't. And by the way, lipid nanoparticles have been known to damage human fertility since 2017, and they chose to use them anyway. No, you can't conclude that this is an accident. You have to conclude, since year after year after year unfolded, knowing this damage, that Pfizer knew, your elected officials knew, your public health authorities knew. This is my speculation. I await an investigation. Our public health authorities knew, our elected officials knew, the FDA knew. There was collusion at the highest levels to make this happen. I'd love for it to be an accident or corporate greed, but it isn't. It is a mass murder. And again, I say this deeply knowingly, as a Jew, as the granddaughter of Rosa and Joseph Wolf and all of their lost brothers and sisters. This is the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history, just numerically, because billions of people have been injected with this. So I will end by telling you why I believe it's a bioweapon, and that it was deployed, in effect, to reduce Western populations and influence. Number one piece of evidence is research I did that found that in 2021, there's an SEC filing, the Securities and Exchange Commission in my country, which is BioNTech, which is the subsidiary of Pfizer that produced this mRNA injection. And it is a memorandum of understanding, meaning an agreement, a legal agreement, that shows a partnership between BioNTech, which we're told is a German company, but it's not a German company, it's a German-Chinese company, because the partnership is with the Chinese Communist Party. The partnership is with Fosun Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the biggest pharma companies in China. And you all know, in any major company in China, it's the partners. Fosun create 1 billion doses of this injection for internal consumption. They use a different injection in China. They manufactured 1 billion doses to Western Europe and North America. And in the SEC filing, it specifies that the IP, intellectual property of the injection, is to be transferred. It doesn't say to a Chinese individual. It doesn't say to a Chinese company. It says to China. So since 2021, if you're taking an intervention that was formulated, manufactured, packaged, distributed by people who have stated that they want to be the world's hegemon by 2049, 100 years after the independence or the establishment of Chinese communist rule, and who have made war on the West in many other ways. And I don't think they're working alone. I think there's alliances at levels that we can discuss, but just from my knowledge that our enemies are making this injection. Also, the deployment, again, isn't random. There are 11 manufacturing plants in Western Europe, 14 now in North America. But the side effects are not random. And again, to me as a journalist, rather than as a doctor, this is very important evidence. Of the almost 43,000 serious adverse events in the Pfizer papers, they're not randomly distributed around the world. They're localized in Western democracies. And not only that, but this really caught my attention as a political consultant. The greatest number of serious adverse events are in the countries with the most influence in Western democracies. So over 42,000 in the United States, and then after tranches of serious adverse events in European countries in descent of political importance and population importance. So Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Spain, Greece, in that order. And then all the rest of the world, the other 52 countries of the world combined amount to about 7,000 adverse events. And what I want to tell you is that it's very easy to target the lethality or the damage of these injections by manipulating things as simple as serious damaging particles as Pfizer, but Pfizer has more DNA contamination as it's been discovered, or by manipulating things as simple as temperature. You remember that it was supposed to be, this material is supposed to be kept very, very cold, and then you stopped hearing about that. The materials coalesce at room temperature and at warmer temperatures. So I can't pursue that, right? This is beyond what's in the Pfizer papers as a journalist. In spite of being called a conspiracy theorist worldwide, I do what I've always done, which is I stick to the facts. I don't go beyond what the evidence provides. But that evidence, to me, requires investigation. How do you take something that easily is manipulated to target populations, and you have these terrible losses and damage and infertility in Western nations? So I'll stop there. We can talk about what I think it means that other plot being mandated. But I will note, if I have a minute to conclude, that if you look with this analysis at who got mandated, certainly in my country, but I believe throughout Western Europe, but in my country, who got mandated? It was people, and you have a right to subpoena them, you have a right to see them. So what's preventing Europeans from seeing what's in those texts?
Let me answer that. That would be our despicable Ursula von der Leyen, who is corrupt to the very core of her being. She simply refuses to give out those texts. She has been admonished by so many authorities, whether it was the ombudswoman or whoever it was, Parliament. Now there's even a court ruling telling her that she was in violation of the EU treaties by refusing to share those texts. And unfortunately, the texts probably don't even exist anymore.
Well,
so, and
let
that's
me
the thing is,
there.
yeah.
As a Texio, I will just note that all texts still exist somewhere and are recoverable, even if she deleted them. I do hope we get through security going home. And I would also say that these are really cosmetic gestures and slaps on the wrist, censure. And now you know that a big crime may have been committed. So I would have thought that what I've shared with you could allow you to pursue criminal investigations. And I assume the rules of evidence give her fewer options in a criminal matter. But, those may be evidence of a very major crime.
Yeah. Okay, anyone? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Obviously, echoing my colleagues in welcoming you here and for your interesting contribution and all the work you've done. And to add to what Christine was saying, I was pregnant twice during the time that vaccines were pushed on us. And the audacity they had to tell us that if you contracted COVID, you ran the risk to have a stillbirth or a miscarriage. But if you had the vaccine, you would be safe, is unbelievable, knowing what you know now. And I mean, I'm ashamed to say that I had 2 shots, and hindsight is 2020. Unfortunately, I wish I knew then what I know now, or maybe listened to Christine more carefully back then would have been helpful. But the sad part is we would only know in about 10 to 15 years' time what will happen to our children, or what we have done to them while we were pregnant. And then the audacity for them, knowing what it did to fertility and knowing what it did to babies, to have the vaccine, to then say, no, it's not the vaccine that would cause it, but actually contracting COVID, that to me is astonishing. That being said, I was wondering whether you know of any studies that are being conducted now to determine what the side effects of COVID have been thus far, because what you've elaborated on here today, it was what Pfizer already knew, but there must be so many more tales. I mean, the things that you mentioned in articles that I've read, things that I recognize in myself, eyesight problems, acute joint pain that came out of nowhere and then just disappeared again. I mean, there must be countless stories that are being attributed to something else, but that is actually vaccine damage. And are you involved in any of those studies or research? Is there anything on a big scale being done to see what damage has actually been caused to our populations, apart from the birth rates, which is very easily measurable in Europe and the West?
So sorry. First, I was just saying, thank God you've got 2 children. And the next thing is, when I said there's hope, even though this is such a dark subject, now that you have the information, this is exactly what humans do to save other humans. You know, if they have some influence authority, they launch the studies, they find the interventions, they find the treatments, and so on. So I never ever thought in my life I would say thank God for President Trump and RFK Jr., but here I am. Because we have RFK Jr. running HHS, we are likely to start getting what he calls gold standard science. And I still think there's huge pressure on him not to look at damage from the COVID injections, but he has been, like one of our biggest drugstore chains has stopped giving the COVID injection because they don't have a recommendation from RFK Jr. CDC. So those are things that are good, that are happening. In terms of other studies,
Okay, I'm going to jump back in here for a minute, and I'm going to put an original link to this video on YouTube in the comments, or further information when I upload this video, because obviously it's such a deep dive. There's so much information layered in there. And what I want to encourage you to do is take your time. You know, make a list of the things, especially anything you think is hinky or questionable or challenging to believe, and then actually take a minute and do some of your own research. Get into it. The facts about this information are getting easier and easier to validate, but dive deep so that you can come to a place of understanding in relation to your own conviction. If you were vaccinated, if you were mandated to be vaccinated and did so to keep a job or keep a kid at home or what have you, then God bless you, and there's no harm, no foul from any sort of ethical point of view, because you were lied to. And that's what you have to understand. You're a victim of fraud. 1 billion people in the world today are sitting here as victims of fraud, them and their families, from top to bottom, pregnant women to geriatrics, and it's going to take a long time to resolve this, and that's if we can get it out in the open, tear the bandage off the wound, air it out, and get to some understanding, and then also hold the criminals accountable by whatever mechanism or means. I do not recommend anything other than a lawful process of accountability. I believe there is such a thing. It's just, is there the will to operate it? I think that will is growing. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly part of that. I want to show you a couple of things that I'm going to move up here. I think I can show this. Let me see if I can get this up here. Yes. Let me see if I can get this up here. What I would like to do is show you this notice that I have from June of 2020, which is my deplatform and ban notice from Vimeo. You can see that Dan from Vimeo's Trust and Safety team, hi Dan, who was the person who led the discriminatory practice, they took down a private server. I had a professional account with an encrypted private server on Vimeo, this same platform that film producers use, like Steven Spielberg and others. You'll notice that they went into my encrypted account. These were not shared videos. These were for my personal archival and for distribution in my network. Dr. Rashid Bhattar, they will ban this immediately. Urgent, please share. Well, they did. They banned it. Not only did they take down my platform, but they removed these videos. You'll see that they took down, they quoted a video from Dr. Shiva on exposing everything deep state trying to hide about CV. And then, of course, you see my video, Truth Bombs Rant number 3. Why are we using lockdown words? And it was a discussion on questions about lockdowns, mask mandates, about the social ostracization that was taking place, including removal of accounts and videos from YouTube. At this very same time, I was banned from Facebook for life for violation of their community guidelines against acts of terrorism and self-harm, for asking questions. You'll see here how far they were going. What they said was Vimeo is committed to combating the spread of material that may misinform the public about the ongoing coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak due to the content volume and the risk of public damage. We need to act quickly, and we will not be able to reconsider removal decisions at present. Well, they never did, and they never would, and they never have. And everything that we were asking questions about has turned out to be true in the worst possible way. Everything that we challenged on a scientific basis turned out to be completely true and have been hidden, and that the powers that be, including the European Parliament, the US FDA, Tony Fauci's office, the NIH, the CDC, in fact, collaborated to hide, to disparage, to discredit anybody, any scientist or any rational person. You don't have to be a scientist to ask questions about common sense issues. They tried to destroy literally friends of ours like Dr. Joe Mercola, America's Frontline Doctors, Dr. Simon Gold, and many, many other people who waved the red flags and asked the important questions were deplatformed. Some even were threatened or lost their medical licenses. Thank God some of them have recovered those licenses. And literally debanked. Banks closed their accounts. PayPal closed their accounts. Citibank closed their accounts for misinformation. And initially, in June of 2020, we were still just asking questions. We were saying, this does not make sense. This really does not make sense. And so we kept on it. And then a couple of months later, I'm going to pause for a second here and show you that the work continued, and that I and other doctors like myself and researchers, scientists, and citizen journalists have been working very, very hard to get those questions that we were forbidden from asking, to get them answered. And in fact, it's the good news and the bad news. The good news is we actually have gotten answers, as was elaborated by Naomi at the European Parliament. The bad news is that they're as bad or worse than we ever imagined. In 2017, I published this book, Recovering Health SARS-CoV-2 Infection Variant and/or Vaccine Booster, on Amazon, and it was immediately shadow banned and very difficult to find. I was able to privately distribute some copies, but the main thrust of this book is not just the information and questions that Naomi had, but also to present solutions like the SomaVeda Thai Yoga Therapeutic Day protocol, traditional Ayurveda solutions, Native American medicine solutions, holistic, naturopathic, and nutritional solutions, solutions from Association of Physicians and Surgeons and America's Frontline Doctors and others. We actually have concrete solutions for most of these issues that have to do with the damage that the vaccines cause. And the trick here is to get the word out that even if you don't have apparent symptoms or you haven't made the connection yet, if you've had the vaccines and boosters, you were damaged, and there is damage. And it could be heart issues, it could be turbo cancer, it could be infertility, it could be dementia, Alzheimer's-like symptoms, whatever. We have some very effective concrete strategies to try and reduce the harmful effects. We just need to get the word out to as many people as possible. So if you'd be so kind to like, share, and comment on this video if you find it helpful, it would warm my heart. Thank you.
Redneck teens with massive machines, everybody living beyond their means. Brotherly love from the messed up genes, nobody wants to intervene. The billboard screams you're advertising, beautiful creatures left to live free under the wheels of your massive RV. All of these things I've come to accept, the quick and the slow. Take a little look inside the place I call home. Pressure to be thin in your own skin, but here you are in Burger King. Preteen, nicotine, dietary Dairy Queen, looking in the magazine. It's all you can do to hold it together. You